thank you very much for joining us. I know it's straight after lunchtime. Hopefully you haven't hit the lunchtime stupor and fallen into a daze, but if you have, just sit back and relax. Hopefully we can make it a good afternoon for you. I'm Mike from Click, so if you don't know who I am or if you haven't come across Click before, we've been providing managed IT services to organisations all over the country for well over 20 years now. I think it's coming up to 25 years now. That's everything from day-to-day IT support and cybersecurity consultations all the way through to cloud solutions. Jay, would you be able to go over to the next slide for me? I think it's all might be listed on that one. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, all the way through to cloud solutions and even a sprinkle of web design and development in there as well. What I would say, we've got hopefully you can see this at the top of the Teams call today. We've got a chat and Q&A function. If you've got any questions, pop them in the Q&A. It's all curated so we can publish the questions. We've got a bit of time at the end as well when Jay's finished on his side of things, just to run through any questions that you've got for us. I'll try my best, but I'm definitely not going to say I'm the expert, so I might leave some of those to Jay. There should also be a link in the chat from my colleague Jenny. If you want to book a free IT consultation with us, just pop your details in there, speak to one of our team about what your IT needs might be as well. Before I hand over to him, I'll kind of quickly introduce. So we've got Jay today from Adobe. I'm sure you all recognise Adobe. You may not have been on any of these sort of webinars with us before, but we're trying to have a sort of a series of partners that we work with, and obviously Adobe and Jay from there are one of those. You may be familiar with the platforms that they've got, but perhaps not as familiar, and I certainly know I'm not, so I'm really looking forward to this one, with the integrations they've got with other providers. So Jay's very kindly here today to talk about one of their big partnerships that I know that's had even more development recently with Microsoft and some of the tools that they're expanding within their own range as well. So I'll stop talking, I'll hand you over to Jay if that's okay, and then I'll be back at the end and we'll curate the Q&A together. But please do chuck any questions you've got in the Q&A. Jay, that's over to you.
Wonderful. And Mike, just to check, you can see my slides okay? Everything okay?
All good, yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. So good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to present to you today. As Mike alluded to, I'm Jay Upton. I've actually been part of Adobe for just under 3 years now, managing what looks a very large, fancy business title, but in short, my responsibilities at Adobe are to manage productivity. And when you think about productivity, I think about Adobe Acrobat, Adobe Sign, and some of the other periphery technologies which we'll cover today. But I manage not only our partner ecosystem, but also look after a bunch of field-aligned salespeople looking after some enterprise customers in the UK and Middle Eastern region. Also a bit of history, because I think actually I'm going to be talking about Microsoft and Adobe today. And I'm going to be talking about Microsoft in a certain way that you'll kind of go, well, how does he know that? Why would he say it like that? And the reason I'm talking like that is because I was actually at Microsoft for 6 years, and I actually led the Microsoft channel for Microsoft, which is a $3 billion a year business. But more importantly is that, you know, servicing customers like yourselves. So thinking about the way that, you know, you as customers want to get the most from your investment in the technology. And so being at Microsoft, I'm in a really fortuitous position to not only talk about Adobe and the technology that we have, but also how this partnership is unique and really what it's going to give you as a customer. But before we delve into the Microsoft partnership, I just wanted to kind of bring us all up onto the same page of where and who Adobe are today. And realistically, the three ways that I think of Adobe, one is around creativity. And I think Adobe are famous for Photoshop, you know, some of the consumer products that we have, but also in the, I suppose in the business world or in the corporate world, we have Creative Cloud, there's Substance 3D, and there's a number of technologies that whether you're creating your own content, content for social media, content for print, whether it's thinking about filmmaking and looking at ways of, you know, really maximizing that production, that's really where Adobe are famous for their creativity. And that's what we call our Creative Cloud business or set of technologies. In the middle, which is what I'm going to be focusing more on today, is around document productivity. So thinking about the way that you create documents, secure documents, making sure that you drive you know, maximum productivity gains, and we'll talk about that today as well. But also thinking about digital signature, audit trail, security. Obviously, it's a big play for and conscious for a lot of companies, and we'll touch on, you know, AI. I know everybody's got their own interpretations of artificial intelligence, but I'll talk what that means to Adobe. And then the third and final areas is around our digital marketing platform, which again is what we refer to as digital experience. And that's like a SaaS hosted marketing platform, again, that probably is more enterprise focused, but is certainly a big part of Adobe's business. But let's talk a little bit more about the partnership. And I think that if you're a customer today that has an investment in Microsoft and you have an investment in Adobe or thinking of investing in Adobe, then there's a bunch of value that you may or may not realize is available to you free of charge. And that's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about, what that looks like and how you can get immediate gains from that. And obviously working with Click IT can really bring that to life for you. So this Microsoft and Adobe partnership is quite an interesting one, because when I think about my time at Microsoft, Adobe was, I suppose in some intents and purposes, was a competitor. We think about in the early days of Microsoft creating Microsoft Word, Microsoft had their own sort of PDF template capability. But what we've seen now is Microsoft evolve into an organization where they've realized that even though they have world-leading technology around productivity, around intelligent cloud, or maybe even in terms of business applications, what we're finding is that Microsoft are not the best at everything, and I'll come back to an analogy in a second. But more importantly is that even when you're using something like Microsoft Teams, like we are today, it's great in terms of video and chat and file share, but actually, is there a way of driving more business productivity? Is there a way of driving business processes, reducing the need for human input, for time and effort to create that document or to create the outcomes that you might be looking for? So from a Microsoft perspective, they recognize Adobe as being the world leader in terms of secure document creation and delivery, in terms of Adobe Acrobat, but also around digital signature. And again, digital signature is not just around just an electronic signature. It's around how can we, provide seals, document seals to prove that they're legally binding. How can we provide an audit trail to prove that somebody did intend to buy a service or a proposition or something similar? So very similar to our daily lives in terms of the way that we sign up for credit agreements or, car hire leasing or whatever it may be. So from a Microsoft point of view, they're looking at ways of bringing third-party vendors best of breed, and Adobe is considered the best in terms of what we do. And from an Adobe point of view, I think it's fair to say that if you're using Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Acrobat Sign, that you might only be using the basic functionality. And there might have been times that you might have looked at one of our competitors and thought, well, I just need to create a PDF document, and therefore this cost alternative, a lot cheaper, could well deliver the same experience. And the reality is that the Microsoft partnership actually is a great example of where we could actually bring a lot more to the life in terms of the way that you're creating documents and sharing and sending them with your customers, suppliers, and employees. So look, let's dive into that a little bit more and talk about what that really looks like. So I suppose the first things first, right, is that Microsoft has, to all intents and purposes, a relationship with a lot of IT technology vendors. So whether you're using backup products, security products, whether you're using SAP or something similar, Workday, they all have a relationship with Microsoft. And that's because Microsoft offers an open, if you like, API foundation that means that me as a vendor, I can create technology that integrates with Microsoft. And so they are a partner. The difference being is that actually the Adobe and Microsoft partnership is one where actually Microsoft are investing resources and time, and also $1 billion a year in terms of bringing the two platforms together. And we're going to show you what that looks like in a second. But in essence, not just the investment from a monetary value, but also our product development teams come together every fortnight to really think about, as Microsoft evolves their platform and evolution of Windows and Office 365 and Microsoft Teams and Modern Workplace, we need to make sure that Adobe Acrobat, Adobe Sign, and some of our API capabilities also evolve at the same time. And even with the recent release of Microsoft Copilot, it's about making sure that we drive an automatic integration for you as a customer that's easy to unlock and utilize. And I'll show you how easy that is on the next slide. I suppose really, if I think about the partnership, I'm going to talk about Microsoft Teams, and I'm going to talk about Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Sign, but this could be Microsoft Dynamics, it could be Power Apps, it could be Microsoft Word, right? But I'm going to focus on Teams just because it's the platform that most people use. And I'm going to talk about Acrobat and Adobe Sign because they're the two main technology areas that I specialize in. But in essence, if you own something from Microsoft and you have something from Adobe, then actually all of the integration is included free of charge in your license. So there is no hidden costs. It's not like when you download an app on the iPhone and you think you've downloaded a game that looks really good, and then all of a sudden you have to pay for additional unlocks or options, that come after that. All of this integration is free of charge within your license. So there is no hidden costs, hidden charges. You don't even need a massive amount of professional services to really bring it to life. Obviously, if you want to do something very bespoke, we can talk about that. But in terms of out-of-the-box functionality, there's a lot of capability there, which we'll come to. But the whole point is that if you're using, say, for example, Microsoft Teams, is that you want to be able to create, edit, share, annotate, and maybe even get people to digitally sign documents within Microsoft Teams. You don't want to be double clicking on a document and it takes you to a web browser, or it takes you to a third-party application that you need to minimize and then go back into Microsoft Teams. So believe it or not, even that experience is much greater. And I suppose the poor analogy, and I'm a person for poor analogies, but the poor analogy would be is that you could go out and buy an Audi A3 and you could drive from A to B. But if you went out and bought an Audi RS3, which, by the way, I've got a big passion for one of those if anybody wants to treat me, but the driving experience is far greater. The music, the surround sound, the engine response, it's a lot greater, a lot better driving experience. And that, to an extent, is what the Adobe and Microsoft partnership gives you, is that your Microsoft Teams and your Adobe experiences become much greater and much better and more effective and faster for you as an organization. I'm going to talk a little bit about Adobe and Microsoft approvals in one of the following slides. But as an example, we even include something called Live Sign, and Microsoft don't do this with anybody else, okay? And even with this integration that we have, Microsoft doesn't have this capability with any of our competitors or plan to. But in essence, Live Sign is where, for example, the police get a lot of low-impact crime cases where let's say Mike, God forbid, but Mike has his laptop stolen from his car, not an RS3, I'm presuming, and he needs to get a crime number to be able to claim it back on insurance. So Live Sign is a way that a police officer could have a Teams call with Mike, could literally have a discussion, record the discussion in Teams if they wanted to, but literally take a witness statement, put that into a document, and use Live Sign to drop the document into the chat with Mike. And they could say, right, Mike, if you can just sign it at the bottom, just to say that it's a witness statement, everything you've said is true. And then if we do catch the perpetrator, we've got something in writing that allows us to prosecute. So the police are using that for low impact crime even now. So we're helping the police force not only become more efficient, more sustainable, accessibility comes into play, which we'll come back to, but also it means that it's more cost effective for them to be able to complete some of the important jobs, but jobs that don't necessarily need to take as much time as they were doing. So, that was something that came to life in the pandemic. So everything I've talked about in that middle column is all around the user experience, bringing it to life, using the applications in a joint way. But actually, it's from an IT experience that this really comes to life as well. So not many people realize, but you can actually set up and deliver your Adobe Acrobat and your Adobe Acrobat Sign using the Microsoft 365 admin console. That basically means that Adobe looks and acts like a Microsoft application. And you'll be using in your Microsoft environment Azure Active Directory. You may have some security needs around single sign-on and multi-factor authentication. And the great thing is that whatever you're using within your Microsoft environment, it will automatically embed that within Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Sign. So there's no need to create a separate console, to learn separate passwords, to create another function around single sign-on. It literally, out of the box, would integrate and come to life for you from an IT perspective. So your cost of deployment, your cost of management is next to zero. Literally, it allows you to do that. And also, for example, Adobe Sign is actually a digital signature software as a service application, and we deliver that on Microsoft Azure. So even if you were creating your own applications on Power Apps, for example, on Azure, then there's no latency or delay in terms of bringing those applications together. And I suppose in summary, even if you couldn't think of the electronic and digitized benefits of using Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Sign, then think about your sustainable benefits and accessibility benefits. And there's some of the things that, now we're seeing public sector, financial, consumer finance organizations really thinking about what they can do to not only drive sustainability, but thinking about how they can be more efficient and perhaps even more competitive. Being able to, I know TSB as an example, they now offer a loan in less than 20 minutes that used to take 2 weeks. And when I say it took 2 weeks, it involved a lot of lorries, a lot of manual data input, and now they're using Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Sign with Microsoft to really digitize that journey. Now, I've been in IT for a long time, and I remember in my early 20s, I was working at an organization and we used to use something called mail merge quite often. And this is where, you would send speculative letters to organizations hoping to sell them a product or a service or something similar. And again, I told you I was poor at analogies, but to an extent, that's what this slide is describing. This is saying that, for example, if I was working at an organization, perhaps I wanted to send a new employment contract to everybody, I could write the employment contract in Word, and then I could use Adobe Sign as a signature tool to get every employee to acknowledge that they adhere to the terms and conditions of employment. And then what I might do is take their name, their address, their employee ID from Workday, and automatically build that document digitally, automatically send that and email that to everybody in the organization. And the great thing is within Adobe Sign is that it would allow me to see who has signed it and who hasn't. And even when they've signed it, it allows me to take that document, save it, maybe push it into a SharePoint somewhere, or even put it back into Workday. So I can see all of the employees that have acknowledged the terms and conditions. I can go into Workday and see that their document is there signed, just in case anybody asks me for a copy in a HR lawsuit or something similar. But also more importantly is I've still got a list of the people that haven't signed, and I can send them reminders weekly, daily or hourly. So again, Adobe Sign allows me to be able to manage that process very effectively. And rather than having a checklist of people that have signed or not signed and then writing emails and it being very administrative, I can actually automate that and also manage and automate the process of signature as well. So what I've got here is Microsoft Word. And what I've done is I've gone to Insert and I've gone to Office Add-ins and I've typed in Adobe. And by the way, there are some free technology available in terms of Adobe Acrobat, for example, that you could embed within Word or within Teams free of charge. So if you're not using Acrobat today, I encourage you to use that as a minimum. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on Add Adobe Acrobat Sign for Word and PowerPoint. And what I want you to notice is that as I'm accepting the terms and conditions, you can see that my ribbon at the top of my Microsoft Word changes. So straight away, I've accepted the terms and conditions. My Adobe Acrobat and my Adobe Sign are now embedded within my Microsoft Word. And that means that I can take any document. This is a blog that I wrote a couple of years ago around accessibility. But what you can see on here is that this is just a normal Word document. But I could, by clicking on one of these icons, create and send that as an Adobe PDF, which is more secure than a Microsoft PDF, first of all. But also, I could click on Fill and Sign or Send for Signature, and I could insert a signature on this Word document, and it would make it legally binding. The moment that somebody signs that digital signature, it would make it contractual, and it would be to law and legal standard of EU law and also UK law as well. And the great thing is, even if I didn't want to go back into Outlook, attach a file, write an email, which takes time, I could actually use Microsoft Word to actually attach the document or send this document straight from Word without using Outlook and put in the email address of the person that I need to send it to. I can also put in a little note to say, this is the discussion that we had, please sign the contract for us to proceed. So the great news is that even within Microsoft Word, the partnership comes to life and increases and makes productivity more efficient. Now that's Microsoft Word, maybe not exciting. So let's think about something like Microsoft Teams. So this is my own Microsoft Teams environment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the App Store. I'm going to then install Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Acrobat Sign within my Teams environment. And what I'm going to do is pin them on the sidebar. And the great thing is that I mentioned earlier about Microsoft Approvals, and Microsoft Approvals acts in two ways. One is that if I'm the person, let's imagine that Mike is the person that's got to sign the agreement. Mike would get a notification, a little red bubble, and it would say, Mike, there's a contract that's been sent to you by Jay Upton. Mike could click on the real-time notification on the activity bar, and it would give him the document to review, and he would have the ability to sign that document within Teams there and then. So the great thing is that it's very efficient and very productive. The other key thing is that with digital signatures, sometimes because they rely on email addresses and email, is either some of us have aggressive junk folders, so sometimes they get lost in junk, or worse still, we have busy inboxes. So I don't know how many times you've done it. I've certainly done it, where you see the email, you've not read the email, but you can see it's there. You think, I'll read that later. You never get back to it, and then 2 days have gone by, and then you forgot to do it. So the great news is that by using Microsoft approvals in Teams, you still get the email in your inbox, but you also get the notification within Teams. So the good news is that there's like a fail-safe way of making sure that you've got a notification. Now let's reverse that. Let's imagine that Mike is my boss, and Mike has given me a contract to create for, I don't know, a new potential employee, and it involves 3 or 4 signatures within the organization. And Mike might be saying, look, Jay, I really want to get this contract signed by the end of play tomorrow. Where are we? Right? How many times have we been asked that? Where are we? So we've got 4 signatures, who signed and who hasn't. And that normally involves a lot of logging into the console to find out where the signatures are, sending emails to individuals within the organization to prompt them or ask them where we are. The great news is that if I've created the contract, I can go to the activity bar and I can see that Jenny and John have signed it, but I'm waiting on Steve and Susan to do that. And I can obviously action that within Teams to resolve that. So the point is, again, even from a contract signing process, it allows me to be able to view that and progress it effectively. So this is what Adobe Sign looks like within Microsoft Teams. And what we can see here, we can see all the documents that we've created and sent. We can see where they are in their signing status. We can see what reminders we've set. And as I mentioned earlier, if it's really urgent, let's start again. If it's not so urgent, maybe we want to give people 30 days to sign it. You might say, send them a reminder once a week for 3 weeks. And then on the 4th week, you might say, send them a reminder for 4 days. And then on the final day, you might say, send them a reminder hourly. So the point is that you can build, if you like, that expectation and pressure on that individual to sign the agreement and remind them. Because obviously if they say, well, I didn't know I needed to sign it, well, that's possibly not true with the amount of reminders. But also more importantly is that they can see that with the increased communication around it, that obviously they're meeting the deadline, which obviously is something they need to think about. I think the other thing to bear in mind is that obviously all of us now have started using Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Teams on our mobile devices, on our tablets, and on our laptops. And so the great news is not only does the integration work on the desktop within Teams, but it also works within your mobile devices. So whether I'm on holiday, whether I'm on the road or in the office, or even walking around the office, I've got the ability to be productive the whole time, but also making sure that it's all consistent across all of those different views. This is what Adobe Acrobat looks like. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a free download that you can have within Microsoft Teams. It allows you to view Adobe Acrobat documents. So if any of you open a PowerPoint within Teams, it automatically opens that within Teams for you to view the PowerPoint and edit it and play with it. Same thing happens with Adobe Acrobat within Teams. The only paying option, coming back to that a little joke earlier about the iPhone, is that if you wanted it to integrate with single sign-on and multi-factor authentication, that's when you would need a full license. But definitely have a look at it if you haven't already. The other key thing is we integrate with the bot within Microsoft Teams as well. So another great example, let's imagine that Mike and I work in HR. Mike's on holiday. He's always on holiday, right? Always on holiday. And somebody decides to contact me. Jay, I was dealing with Mike. Mike promised to get this finished before he went away. He obviously didn't manage it. Could you help me? And so I've got a choice, right? Subject to Azure Active Directory rights. I could either, well, first of all, I can work out what document Mike was handling. So I can say show documents for Mike Horton, okay? And again, subject to security, it would give me the option. I could see all of the different documents that Mike was dealing with, and I've got a choice. I can either, on behalf of Mike, send a reminder to that individual that needs to sign the agreement, or I can download and take over the process. So the nice thing is that I'm not ringing Mike or WhatsApping Mike while he's on vacation. I can actually progress it and work it through in the background. Now, look, between two people, probably doesn't sound that impressive, but if you're a call center of maybe 10, 15, 20 people, and maybe people lose their connections on the mobile phone or whatever it may be, then it means that as a team, we can still service the customer despite the call handler not being the same person. Another big passion of mine is accessibility, and I think every organization has a responsibility, whether it's to its own employees, whether it's to its customers or to their suppliers, around making sure that users have the ability to prescribe their accessibility needs. And what do I mean by accessibility? I suppose, disability is something that we think about in terms of hard of hearing, hard of sight, but we don't think necessarily of people with colour blindness, dyslexia. If I think about myself, I'm nearly 50 years old. I know, but 50 years old, and my eyesight is definitely depleting. My hearing is definitely going. But I can use some of the features within Microsoft Teams to be able to help me, whether it's eyesight, whether it's hard of hearing, using transcripting. And so I don't know whether you guys are aware, I'm sure you are, but within Microsoft Teams, you can right click on any message, use the immersive reader. And the immersive reader means that you can change the background color, you can change the fonts. I've actually switched on the dyslexia view here. That's what the dots are between the words. Sometimes you may have employees where English isn't their first language. So again, we're not just thinking about accessibility needs, but we're thinking about language and linguistic needs, right? So I might be a person that maybe I've had a message come through, not sure what October means. So I can right click on October. Not only does it give me the readout version of October in English, it gives me the Italian word, and it even gives me a read out loud of October in Italian. I won't be doing that for demonstration purposes today, but you get a sense of what the capabilities are. And I think to all intents and purposes, this partnership between Adobe and Microsoft means that we also as Adobe support a very similar approach. And so as an example, we've got Adobe Acrobat here, we've got the contract, we've changed the color background, we've changed the font, we've changed the font color. We also have what we call liquid mode. So if you've got a touchscreen device, whether it's a mobile, tablet, or indeed desktop, you've got the ability to zoom in, and the document will be viewed by Adobe Acrobat in a way that it doesn't pixelate, it gives maximum viewing capability, and that's something that we've offered. The other thing we have included within Adobe Acrobat is something called Read Out Loud. And Read Out Loud is actually what a lot of the banks use with Adobe Acrobat, where they assume that all applicants for any financial loans or agreements have a reading age of 7 years old. They have to assume that not everybody is, Harvard educated. So what they do is they use the Read Out Loud option, which basically means the computer will read this contract in a way that it's presented. So it would say, "Dear Microsoft," pause, "non-binding," new sentence. The letter is a statement of support. So you get the idea that in essence, not only is it read out loud, but we're trying to make it as though somebody is physically sat there reading the document using the punctuation and the language that was intended. Another key thing that you guys might be interested in is making sure that any document that you share, whether it's with your customers, suppliers, or employees, is supporting accessibility technology. What do I mean by that? But I'm talking about screen readers and those kind of technologies that are assistive to make somebody's life much easier in terms of utilizing technology. And so we include what we call accessibility auto tagging, which means that we will make sure that when that document is delivered to that user, that it is ready to integrate with any assistive technology that might be available. And again, nobody offers this. Even Microsoft are really impressed with the way that Adobe can deliver this capability within the document. So we are, if you wanted to set a standard for accessibility, then you can make sure that every document that leaves the organization is meeting those standards. And even if the author has no regard for accessibility, because they may not, then at least as an organization, you can still uphold and deliver that as well. And some of you might be thinking, it's something we're thinking of doing. Accessibility is something we've always thought about doing. I actually did an interview with Hector Minto around 12 months ago, and Hector Minto not only works for Microsoft as an accessibility leader, but he also represents the UK government for technology around accessibility as well. And we don't talk about the products and the bits and bytes of products, but we talk about how, as an organization, you can use technology and IT to create an accessible environment for your customers, for your employees, and obviously for your suppliers. And switching on certain options within your Microsoft environment and within your Adobe Acrobat environment can make all of the difference. If you think it wouldn't, I would recommend that you speak to somebody that's hard of sight, hard of hearing, somebody that's maybe getting a lot older in their careers, a little bit like myself. And we will talk to you how, using some of that technology can really enhance our productivity and the way that we work. So something to think about. So I talked about AI from a auto tagging and accessibility perspective. I'm really happy to share with you today. I was just saying to Mike and Jenny earlier on today that we've only literally just announced some Gen AI capability within Adobe Acrobat. And I suppose really, if any of you are using Copilot, Copilot is really what I would term a digital assistant. In other words, Copilot is trying to make you even more productive. So if I'm looking at a document within, or I'm looking at an email within Office 365, the Copilot assistant will basically say, would you like your reply to say, thanks very much for the document, I would like to proceed. It's almost like grayed out. It allows you to use that suggestion in terms of progressing that conversation or something similar. I suppose to all intents and purposes, that's what Gen AI is offering Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Sign capabilities, is where you might have a large document of 30 pages. You might just want to understand at a top level in 5 bullet points, what is this contract about, or what is this document about? And then you might, for example, have 2 versions of the document. Maybe you're dealing with a solicitor. They've sent you an initial draft. You've asked for some changes and the new documents come through. That would involve maybe an hour of reading those contracts back to back. Whereas actually using the Gen AI assistant, it could actually highlight what the changes are. And you could then have an immediate view of those changes. So rather than having to verify it yourself, the Gen AI assistant will obviously allow you to do that. But also, not available today, but in the coming months, is the capability where you could actually ask the assistant to do something on the back of that. So you might say, I've read the contract, please turn it into a full verified contract with a signature field at the bottom, and automatically send it back to the recipient that's sent with this initial draft, or something similar. So the idea being is we're trying to help people that use Adobe Acrobat and thinking about digital signatures. How can we speed up their time on reviewing documents, creating documents? And as I say, we're seeing some huge use cases with some of our beta customers, where not only are they getting a much deeper insight of those documents immediately, but also it allows them to save several hours of creating and monitoring documents as they go through. So as we come towards the end of the presentation, I suppose really one of the things that I want to leave you with is just really think about how the Microsoft and the Adobe partnership can really make a difference to your organization. I think, if I'm brutally honest, it's not a question of me saying if you have any manual and or paper-based processes in your organization. I think it's fair to say even today, the most transformative organizations still have different types of people working in their organization. Some people are maybe a little bit more old school. They prefer pen and paper. They like to physically write their signature on a document. But what I would suggest that you do is think about what you can do as an organization to digitize that. And believe it or not, even with the persona around physically signing documents, you could buy a Microsoft Surface device. You could use Microsoft Teams, you could use Adobe Acrobat Sign and still deliver that same experience that user perhaps is more secure or more used to doing. But likewise, you can think about ways that you can digitize and automate some of the processes you do. I mentioned earlier around TSB, not only did they save paper, save petrol, and save postage. I can't believe how much postage is now, by the way. But the reality is that they also gained a competitive edge, because what they ended up doing was taking a 2-week average process, which, by the way, most of their competitors had. And what they managed to do is not only save all the money on the postage and the process, but they also got a competitive advantage on the back of it. So just think about the various departments. I've gone very generic here, but they're probably all using Microsoft Teams. But just think about what can we do to digitize that paper-based process or that manual process that might be in the office, and how do we bring that digitally into the environment? Because not only does it give you more efficiency, but when we think about the pandemic is behind us now, but hybrid work is something that I think a lot of employees would really appreciate, and organizations, I think, seem open to it. And so digitizing those processes benefits the working environment as well. And so I suppose one thing to think about, and a lot of the customers that I'm dealing with, they use Adobe Acrobat and or Adobe Sign as a point product, or they use Microsoft Word as a point product, or Microsoft Teams as a point product. And really what you want to be thinking about is, how can you get your organization to be at stage 2? And stage 2 is not anything complex. This is embedding Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Sign within your Microsoft Teams environment, or Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Sign within your Word environment, right? That's stage 2. So if you're not doing that today, think about what that could look like. Work with Click IT, who I'm sure would have the capability to give you some guidance, advice, and support in being able to do that. And then stage 3 is a bit like the mail merge example that I gave you at the start of the presentation. Are there documents that you create on a daily basis where there are a lot of people hours being taken to just create a document and send that to a customer or a citizen or a client or a supplier? And are there ways that actually digitally you could generate those documents just using something like Power Automate, Adobe Acrobat, and using some services from Click IT to be able to bring that to life for you? And then the final one is, and I'm not saying that this is the audience or that you were necessarily using these applications, but if you are a user of Dynamics 365 or Salesforce or ServiceNow, then actually we have some built out the box capability there as well to be able to, from end to end, completely create a document from scratch, depending on that customer or employee interaction. But that's for another day. And so we will share this content with you afterwards, Mike. I know you're nodding, Ash, that's great. We'll share the content
Absolutely.
with you. What you notice I've done on here is I've given you some case studies, and these case studies are not just about Adobe. These are Microsoft and Adobe case studies. I've tried to give you a variance. So there's a banking and financial. We've got retail, car retail admittedly, but retail, government. So if you're a charity, government organisation, then Norfolk County Council is a huge user of our technology. And then I've got construction as well. So with that, I'm going to hand back over to you, Mike.
See you soon, everybody. Take care.